I made this crosscut sled about 2 years ago, and it served its purpose pretty well. But as I was using it, I wish I had incorporated certain features that would have made it easier to use or more versatile. And then about a month or so ago, I had the need to make a 45-degree cut, and I decided to use the sled, and that essentially ended the zero clearance that I had. So I figured it was time to make a new crosscut sled, and this was the design that I came up with. Essentially the same as the old one with some new features, including a T-slot, T-track in the top. This is largely used for mounting a stop block. So when you want to make repeatable cuts, you can mount a block here and just move your workpiece over, and it references against that stop block. The problem, though, when I started researching all of the commercially available stop blocks, is that I noticed most of them suffered from the same design flaw as I saw it. So let me show you what I mean. So these are 3 examples of stop blocks that I found online. One's made by Craig, one's made by Rockler, and this one's by Woodpecker. They're all in the 20 to high 30 price range. And all of these are flip stops, meaning they can flip out of the way. But each one of them, as you'll notice, is really only attached at one point of contact. There's only one bolt that attaches it. And the problem you encounter there is when you hit a workpiece against that stop and it's only attached at one point, it's going to have a tendency to twist along that point no matter how hard you clamp it down. And the further out this is from the fence, the more it will twist because there's more leverage being applied. So after some debating, I decided to go with this stop block. This is actually made by a YouTube woodworker named Jonathan Katz-Moses. This is his Universal No Deflection stop block. And the key thing that drew my eye to it is it's actually connected at 2 points of contact here. So that's going to avoid the twisting, deflecting in this direction that you would get with stop blocks attached with just 1 point of contact. So I looked through this and I put it through its paces, and I'll give you what I like and dislike about it and tell you what I'm going to use going forward. But first, let me take this apart and show it to you. So this is all the stop block comes with. There are 2 pieces of aluminum attached with a brass thumb screw and 2 star knobs that come with bolts. The first thing to be aware of is that these knobs come with actual bolts, bolt head bolts, standard bolts, something that looks like this. And that is a bit of an issue because bolt heads are actually slightly thicker than T-slot bolt heads. You can see there's just a little bit of difference in thickness. Now you would think that wouldn't matter much, but these T-tracks I use, there's actually not that much room. So if you come over here, you can see that there is not a ton of room right here for a bolt head to slide. Now, the thing that complicates matters is that right here, if you can see, I have a screw that screws down the T-track, and it's not flush with the surface. To do that, you would actually need to countersink or use a smaller screw, which I didn't. But even though I didn't do that, these T-slot bolts that I typically use work just fine. When I use a standard bolt head, like the one with the KatzMoses, it hits that screw. So either you need to countersink that screw and sit it flush or below that surface, or you need to do what I did and modify the bolt heads at the sander, just kind of sand them down to make them fit and slide properly in the slots. Again, not a huge deal, but just something to be aware of. So as far as the basic anatomy of the block itself, you have these 2 pieces of aluminum and a brass thumb screw. You take off the thumb screw, and these 2 pieces slide fairly easily, and you can position the front face in any number of different spots. So in theory, this allows you to take this to any fence you have, adjust it, and it'll get you a nice workable stop block. My fence, though, is, I'd say, fairly basic. This is a 3/4 inch base on my table saw sled. Some folks use 1/2 inch plywood, others use 3/4 inch. And my blade is a 3 1/4 depth of cut. So as a result, to accommodate the all the way depth of cut here, my fence is about 3 inches. And on a 3-inch fence, this stop block does not come down far enough to accommodate 3/4 inch material, which is the majority of what I use. So if I want to use this stop block with 3/4 inch or less material, I need to move it into one of the down positions. And that is where the stop block has some issues. So for these tests, I'm actually going to attach the stop block in the fully back position. I think that's probably where it's at its strongest. And what I've done was I flushed up these two edges together and I put it in the fully upright position. So if you do that and you use the stop block and you push a workpiece against it with just a moderate amount of force, there is no deflection this way. There's no twist, and that's a function of the 2 points of contact. So that was a very good idea. There really isn't that much deflection, although I can kind of feel the red part start to push over. It's kind of hard to see, but it does move just a little bit. And with repeated cuts, it moves over just a little bit more. Again, not really too much, and not really a problem for me. The issue, though, is when I move it down even one spot. So if I have to move it down one to, say, for example, accommodate 3/4 inch stock, and I flush it up. Unlike last time when I was hitting the silver and the red, I'm only hitting the red at the bottom with this 3/4 inch piece of wood. And this is actually not very strong because it's only attached by this, only secured by this thumb screw. So I flushed it up, and just with a moderate amount of force, I'll do about 10 or so. And if you watch closely, you might be able to see what happens. So you can kind of see that it moved. If I can get kind of an aerial view here, you can see that it is kind of separating a bit. And, even with the thumb screw clamped down as hard as I could get it, it still does deflect. So I don't think I would call this a no deflection stop, because if you're just contacting the red portion, there's just not enough hold with this thumb screw to prevent it from truly deflecting. Now, I should say that you could probably avoid this by very gently contacting the workpiece against the stop. But if you've ever done batching work, you know that that's usually not how you do it. You usually just kind of, with a moderate amount of force, hit your workpiece up against the stop and make your cut. And that's going to cause it to deflect a little bit. Not a ton. But for something that's marketed as a no deflection stop, that is some deflection. So after I bought the stop block, I thought, maybe I'll just try and throw together one of my own and see if I like it. So I spent an hour or so the other night and just roughed together a pretty crude type of stop block. It incorporates some of the features of this design. There are 2 points of contact. It's pretty broad. And this is just 2 pieces of maple glued together, attached with 2 screws. And instead of slots, like on this stop block, there are fixed holes. So this won't come in and out like this stop block will. It's just fixed. I also took a piece of oak and nailed it, not screwed it, but nailed it to the piece of maple to make a sort of flip stop. So it's important that you use a nail if you do this. If you use a screw, every time you open and close this, that's going to screw in or screw out. So it's going to get tighter or looser depending on which way you're going. So you drill a hole that's just a little bit smaller than the nail. You drive the nail, and on this piece right here, it actually would be good if the nail hole was exactly the size of the nail to allow it to rotate freely. But anyway, I gave it a whirl. I kind of liked it. I varnished it, and now I'll show you how I will use this. I'm using the same bolts and knobs that came with the KatzMoses, and if I run the workpiece against mine, just like the KatzMoses, I find that I don't get much deflection, even if I kind of ram it. But I really do think I will use the flip stop feature of mine a lot. And that's why I think I'm probably just going to use this over the KatzMoses. There's just too many times I can think of where I've been worried about the offcut piece getting trapped between the blade and the stop block. And sometimes it's just not safe to use a pencil or something small to hold that down. So I think I will like the advantage of being able to move a piece over, flipping the stop out of the way, making the cut, moving it back, flipping down, moving back over, flip up, and repeat. So here's my final verdict. I think that if you are someone who pushes your workpiece against your stop block with anything approaching a moderate level of force, which is me, the KatzMoses is going to struggle to maintain its accuracy when you are contacting just the red portion, that is to say when it's in anything but the complete upright position, because that red portion has a tendency to deflect left and right. For me though, I'm probably not going to use the KatzMoses that much. I'm probably just going to use my own, just because I prefer the flip stop option more than I thought I would. And I like the fact that mine's longer, sits a little bit lower, and I don't have to worry about deflection of it because it's contacting the entirety and not just the red. So props to Jonathan. I think it's a neat design, and I think it is far superior to any stop block that mounts with just one point of contact. But that being said, you need to be aware of what you're buying and you need to be aware of how you're going to use it to make sure that you're making an informed decision.